Does it work? Can you hear me? Yes. Great. Okay. Hello, people. First, I want to say that it's very cool to be here because I have never given a talk before in the US. So this is for me a first-time experience. And I also want to give a warning. This is the first time I'm using Keynote, so beware for a lot of weird animations. So my name is Ives van Hoorne, which is quite hard to pronounce, even in the Netherlands. So you can call me Ives, you can call me Ives. My friends have also trouble with my name for some reason. They call me Flip. If you want to call me Flip, that is fine as well. You can find me on the interwebs under the name CompuIves, or CompuIves, or CompuIves. So I am going to talk about CodeSandbox, or rather the story. And first I want to know how many of you have heard about CodeSandbox before? That's good. And how many of you have used CodeSandbox before? Oh, that's even better. That's okay. That's very cool. Then I'm not going to demo anymore. Then you know everything. No, that's a joke. So I'm going to talk about the story actually of CodeSandbox, and for that we have to go back 7 years. 7 years ago, I was a web developer for an auction website called GetAWiki, and we were converting our Ruby on Rails pages from, well, Ruby on Rails to React, and that was quite a new technology back then. And at some point, I was on vacation to a village called St. Ives, and we went to that village because my name was in it, and that was the only reason, but it looks pretty beautiful. And I got questions there from my coworkers about pieces of code in React Router, and I didn't have my laptop with me, so they started sending me code snippets on Slack, and I had to decipher with my head what was going on, and that didn't really work. And at the time, I was in the habit that every time I had a problem, I would write down the problem with a solution. And so I started thinking, okay, how to solve something like this? And I asked myself, what if you have a development environment always available? And like many ideas, you don't do much with it. You put it in your idea box, and then you move on with your life. And in my case, I started drinking a lot of beer. I went to university. I became a student. And at first, that was fun. I started going to student parties. There was a lot of fun. And I started going to lectures. But at some point, I started to go to Java lectures. And one lecture was okay. Second lecture was about object-oriented programming, but on the third lecture, I started to think, okay, I want to do something next to my studies. I want to build something again. And I went to my idea box, and the top idea there was this development environment. And so I grabbed my sketch, and I put that in front of my screen. I made this beautiful design, very advanced. You can see that I'm a developer. There is this button here, the B for button, and you have code here and a preview here. And it was called React Sandbox. In the end, we renamed it to CodeSandbox because the domain name was cheaper. And I got excited. This was enough, so I started with the first implementation. And I was so happy to see this working. I was very impressed with the fact that you could type stuff, and it would update the preview live. And we would show very aggressive errors, and I got so excited that I now started working on it in my free time. And so the second version was this. We started to see an address bar, we started to see some tabs, and then I started thinking, what if you can actually have NPM dependencies as well, that you can build NPM packages in CodeSandbox. So here you have this little dependency project thing, and the idea was that you could share them with people. But that looks a bit like a file tree, so I made it a file tree, and it started to become more like an editor. And with a bit more polishing, adding NPM package support, we had our first version of CodeSandbox. The interesting learning from this is when I started working on this, I wanted to build a component editor, really a React component editor. Then I wanted to build a component library builder. Then I wanted to build an online component library builder where people could build and share components with each other. And in the end, it became an online code editor. And the learning from this is that you should let your idea evolve. If you have an idea that is not perfect, if you think that it's not good enough yet, that's not a problem, because probably during the implementation you will refine your idea. And I've talked with a lot of people who said that they didn't start working on something because they thought the idea was not good enough. But that's the point, because this will give you time, critical thinking, to actually work on the idea more and more. So we got this beautiful version, and I want to do it as a little demo to show actually what CodeSandbox looks like. This is CodeSandbox, and it feels much like a code editor, except we have this preview here. And this preview is editable. Like, for example, I could fork this sandbox, and now I have a new version of the sandbox, and I can change, for example, this to Hello World or Hello Atlanta, and now I have a new project that I can share with other people. And they can look at it, they can make their own changes, and then they will create a fork as well. And so you have this sort of forking collaboration on top of each other. And then together with that, you have NPM dependency support. And that is in a nutshell what CodeSandbox is. And so everything was working. It was, I think, at the start of 2017 that it was done, but then I lost motivation because, you know, I was working on this for 5 months or something. I looked at it every day, and I started to lose the excitement that I had in the first version. And because of that, I started going back to my lectures. I was thinking, okay, I'm done with this side project. Let's put it in the cooler and then move on back to the lectures. And then my friends asked me like why I was going more to lectures again. And I shared CodeSandbox with them. I shared like how it worked, and they started playing with it. And they were much more excited about it than I was expecting. They were very enthusiastic. And I started to think, well, maybe there is actually an idea, a good idea here. And so we set the goal. We said, we want to release this on April 1st, 2017. Let's build every feature that we want to build, but if there's any feature unfinished on that date, we drop it from the whole product. And so you can see, whoosh, this sudden spike of commits here. And the learning from this is that you should seek external feedback, because you're looking at it every day, and because of that, your view might get warped of what you're building. Also, release fast, because it's interesting. In the end, we had to drop some features from CodeSandbox that we never got around to building. And they never got shipped because no one was asking for it. There's one PR that's still open for NPM registry support, that you can add an NPM registry to your own organization. Never merged, and we're probably not going to merge it anymore because there's just so many merge conflicts at this point. And yeah, people are not really asking for it. Also, follow KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, stupid. There's also some implementations that I've done on CodeSandbox that I never thought would scale. For example, we're storing all files in a Postgres database. At this point, we have 50 million sandboxes and 500 million files, and they are still all happily sitting there in the Postgres database, and response times are still 100 milliseconds. So it's interesting to see how I lost a lot of sleep on how to store files, and in the end we went with Postgres, and that worked out well. So try to keep it simple first, and then you will learn from the usage whether you need to update certain things. So the big day is here. It became April 2nd, not April 1st. I think it's generally not a good idea to release on April Fool's Day. And we had our student champagne and everything. We were ready, and we put out the tweet, and we were waiting. We were waiting and waiting and waiting, and we got a whopping 6 likes. And the most frustrating part is those 6 likes were all from my high school friends. So they didn't even do anything with coding. They were just supportive. And so we started wondering, like, what do we do now? And I remember reading this marketing book. I think it was 12 Rules of Marketing or something. And there was one rule that stood out for me, and that was, it's better to have 100 true fans than 10,000 people who like you. It's better to have 100 people who talk to their friends and family about what you're building or are giving constant feedback of what you're doing than 10,000 people who know you and who like to use the product, but that's it. Because those 100 people, they will sell it to other people, and that was very interesting. So we started suddenly to focus on the unscalable things, because it's easier to get 100 people when you talk with 100 people, right? And so we started to really talk to people, and it was pretty extreme. Like, for the first 300 sandboxes, I would look at those sandboxes, and if there was a bug in it, I would fork it and send them an email with the fixed sandbox. And whenever people asked for a feature request, if it fitted in the ideology of what we wanted to build, we would also try to ship it pretty soon, because it shows that we were listening to those people who asked for it, but only if it fits, because you can also go pretty wild with the features there. So ship often was very useful, and also ship publicly was also really useful, because there will be a lot of people who like you, and if they see you constantly shipping new things, they will retry and they will play with it more, and they might become fans. And with that, it started to grow a bit and grow a bit and grow a bit and grow a bit. It was pretty crazy. At some point, it was like we were in the dream of growth. It was everything that we expected to be. Even Dan Abramov said, whoa, CodeSandbox is cool. And I created a screenshot of this, and I put it on Snapchat, and I sent it to my family and friends, saying, dit is so cool, which is Dutch for this is so cool. There was also someone who said, this is feedback. Marry me, I'm in love with you, this is delicious, thank you, I've included you in my will. And I'm still trying to search this person, see who they are. And I also sent this, and I sent wat een feedback, which is Dutch for what a feedback. And as CodeSandbox became bigger and bigger and bigger, we started to see more pull requests, we started to see more feature requests, and we started to write out some values. We thought it is important to live by certain values so that you don't forget who you are. One of those is lower the learning curve. And that is a very important one, because when CodeSandbox came out, something unexpected happened. People started to learn how to code using CodeSandbox. And in hindsight, it makes sense, because you can go to CodeSandbox, you can click a button, and you have an environment set up. You don't have to think about tooling, you don't have to think about a terminal. Should I use Create React App? Should I use Next.js? Or you get an environment that you can work with. And that became our most important value, because it was super cool to see what people did. We also had encourage sharing and discovery, and the sharing was already pretty, I guess, obvious. But the discovery is pretty interesting, because a lot of people are building stuff on CodeSandbox, and there's an opportunity to get inspired from this. So we have a search page, codesandbox.io/search, and there you can search for sandboxes, and you can also filter by dependencies. So if you're looking for inspiration on how to build a user library, for example, you can use that. And we also want to maintain a state of flow, because when you're in flow, you're having the best feeling that you can have. Like, you're completely in a state where you forget everything around you, and we want to keep you in that state if that's possible. So those are the values of CodeSandbox, and I mainly want to talk about the last value, because CodeSandbox started to become more popular and popular, and people wanted to do more than creating prototypes and examples on CodeSandbox. People started to build blogs, they started to build apps, and one of those apps was Excalidraw, and that was a very interesting application of it. And I'm not sure how many of you know Excalidraw. It's an incredible whiteboarding tool. All the diagrams that I have in this presentation are also using Excalidraw. And it started as a sandbox, as a prototype. It was called Excalibur, and it was shared on Twitter, and people forked it, and people started to contribute back to it. And it worked out well until they started to turn it into a GitHub repo. And that's when CodeSandbox started to see a bit of its limits, because we were running everything in the browser. We were trying to emulate Git in the browser, we were trying to emulate the JavaScript bundler in the browser, also ESLint, and they started to see discrepancies between what they would see locally and what they would see on CodeSandbox. So we were thinking, how can we actually enable CodeSandbox for big projects, and how can we enable CodeSandbox for really big projects? And this is something that we have been working on for the last 2 years now, maybe a bit too long. I said ship fast, and then we're taking 2 years to build something. But yeah, we went to the drawing board, and we started to ask ourselves, how can we enable that same flow of CodeSandbox, where you have this forking mechanism, but integrated in your existing workflow. So you should be able to use it with GitHub, you should be able to use it with your VS Code, you should be able to use it with your Vim. And that is the thing that we have now released, I think, 6 months ago. It's called CodeSandbox repos. I'm gonna do this animation at least 3 times, because this is my best slide of the presentation. Okay, once more. Especially the fire. It's called CodeSandbox repos. And what is CodeSandbox repos? It's the same flow of CodeSandbox. So with CodeSandbox, you always had a sandbox, and you would be able to fork that sandbox, and you would get a new sandbox, which is a copy, and you can work on it. But now we integrate it with GitHub. So every sandbox, if you import it in if you import a GitHub repo in CodeSandbox, every branch has a sandbox attached to it. So the main branch has a sandbox. If you start a new branch, it will have a sandbox. And every branch will always have one sandbox attached to it. And the cool thing about this is that if you're working on the main branch, when you press fork, you will get a new branch, and then you can also contribute back. That is the new functionality that you really get. And I want to show this, and this is going to be interesting. So to show it, yeah, this one is maybe tricky. I wanted to show that at CodeSandbox, we are using CodeSandbox to develop CodeSandbox. So you can see here, this is our whole repo in CodeSandbox, only the right side, I think. I'm not sure if I'm connected anymore. And exactly because of that, I have a smaller example. So this is Next.js running in CodeSandbox. And you can see here that we're on the main branch. And this sandbox is also tied to the main branch. You can also see, is it big enough, by the way? I can't see the screen. You can also see that this one is protected, which means that we don't really allow you to make changes to the main branch, because it would get pretty wild if everyone would make changes to the main branch. Instead, what happens is when I, for example, want to make a change, let's say I want to, oh, it's still loading, I think. Let me refresh just to be sure. Okay, let's say I want to make a change to learn, for example. This is a trick that I want to show. You can click on a component and we'll open the code that is tied to that component. And I want to change this to hello RenderATL. Now, when you press save, we actually create a new branch for you. It says it here in the bottom, new branch draft/strange smoke created. And we're actually in a new environment. The main branch is still running, but we're now in a new server that is running the same thing. And you can now see hello RenderATL. Now, for our accessibility value, we wanted to make it easier for people to contribute to a repository. And Git can be quite confusing. You need to create a commit, you need to push the branch, you need to then go to GitHub and then see that branch in the top. So we wanted to put that behind a button. So you can click here on Create PR. And we handle then creating the commit, creating the branch on GitHub, and also pushing that commit. And then we also handle creating the pull request itself. And we generate a commit message with GPT based on the diff, depending if you have that setting turned on or not. And you can do that with more things. You can say like, let's say I want to remove all of this. This is the other functionality that I want to show. Let's say we remove all of this. And let's also remove the image because it gets pretty wild. And you can also still make commits if you want to, like you have here this button, remove unnecessary code and update styling. And we have a second functionality that we released, I think, a week ago that I also wanted to show because I find it very cool. You can click on a component and then you can say what changes you want to make. So for example, make this a rainbow and make it say RenderATL, for example. And now it will look at the context of your repository. It will look at what current libraries you are using. And it also looks at the props that a component can have to generate new code. And now, wow, look at this. It's not really a rainbow, though. It's an attempt. But it's using for example, here, Tailwind to enable this. That is the little demo of how it works. So the question is how this works and how we can make it work. And that's what I want to talk about on the technical side, how we enable this. And every branch is based by a micro VM. And that enables us to use some technology that is very interesting. And the advantage of this is that you can run anything. We can run Python, Rust, or a Minecraft server even. I would not recommend you to run a Minecraft server on CodeSandbox. And you can run it with any editor. You can connect your VS Code to it with your own extensions and your themes. You can use Vim with it. We have an SSH extension, so you can also connect with SSH. And you still have live collaboration. Like you could be working in your VS Code. You could share a link with someone else, maybe with a designer to check what you're working on. And they can then actually see what you're working on in the online editor while you're working in VS Code. And this also works with PRs, by the way. I forgot to show that. Did I show it? I don't think I did. OK, now I quickly want to show that, depending on how much time I have. Yeah. Every PR also has a development environment that you can use to review. So you might be using CodeSandbox to develop locally, but then you use CodeSandbox on pull requests to review the code, and everything will be preloaded. So you can click on the web editor, or open in VS Code Insiders, or open the preview directly. But the question is, how can we make this fast? Because we were running everything in the browser, and with that, we were actually running the dev server, and that allowed us to make a fast experience. And I'm not sure how many people, when they start their dev server, have to wait 20 seconds, 30 seconds? Yeah, that's for me as well, and it feels a bit slow. And imagine now that every time you create a new branch, in CodeSandbox, we create a new environment. So imagine that you have to do it every time you create a new branch. And so we started to think about this, can we solve this with micro VMs? And the answer is, we don't load the dev server. And we use a technology that people kind of use every day. Look at how enthusiastic he watches. When you run your Next.js server on your MacBook, and you close your MacBook, and you go to Atlanta, to Amsterdam, it doesn't really matter, and you open your MacBook, the Next.js server is still running because of hibernation. And we do the same thing with CodeSandbox. And because of that, it feels fast. So when you have a VM, when you have a branch, after 30 minutes, we snapshot its disk and memory. So the next time you come back, it will continue exactly where it left off. Dev servers will be loaded. And we don't only do this for like a single branch. We have a VM for every branch. So you could be working on one branch, and someone could say, hey, you need to quickly fix this. You could switch then to that branch, fix it without having to, well, change code or commit anything. And then you can switch back to your old branch without having to wait for the dev server or npm install or those things to load. And because of that, reviewing PRs is also faster, because every time a new commit comes in on a PR, we wake the VM quickly to just reload everything, and then we hibernate the VM again. Oh, yeah, Fire. And that's enabled with Firecracker. And Firecracker allows to do these kind of things. And this is also what powers our forking. So whenever you fork, we make an exact clone of that environment, and we do the same trick. We use the snapshot, and we kind of just create multiple VMs from that same snapshot. So whenever you fork main, we make a snapshot, we copy that snapshot, and we create a new branch from that new snapshot. And this is challenging, and I have written 2 blog posts on how we make this fast, because these snapshots, they can be 10 gigabytes, for example. So copying them within 2 seconds is challenging, and we have a goal to have everything loading in 2 seconds. Oh, but this is a risky demo, and I'm all in for it. Okay, so I have Minecraft. I am, in this case, actually running a Minecraft server. And I want to show you how this VM cloning also works with Minecraft servers. So I am here connected to, I have here a Minecraft server running using Docker. And I have Tailscale running, which allows me to connect to it through a VPN. And now I'm connecting. If you look at the Minecraft server logs, you can see me connecting here. I'm here in, ooh, it's a bit dark, isn't it? Yeah. Feel like a true post-millennial using Minecraft as a demo. I can now build a little sculpture. You know, our logo is so simple. You can kind of say that, oh no, this is our logo. Now I disconnect, and I click Create Branch. And what happens then is we clone the old VM, and we start a new VM with the exact same contents as the old VM. And this also has a new ID. Now, if I add that server here, Minecraft server 2, and I connect to it, it has the same structure. And now I can make it a flower. And if I go back to the old server, it should not be a flower. It's not a flower. So that is the VM cloning little Minecraft demo. And this enables, we also just enabled this for sandboxes too, so you could run sandboxes with Rust, with Python, with Dino, Bun, Node.js. And it's something that we keep on working on, because there's some cool things that you can do with this. If you're interested, you can import the repo on the CodeSandbox.io dashboard, or you can ask me, because I'm doing a lot of user research right now, so I can also watch over your back and then see how you're doing things. Also, in general, if you want to talk to me, I'd love to talk to people. I have stickers. I'd love to talk about how things works in CodeSandbox, but also just generally how the journey was from student project to company. And that is mostly my talk. Thank you very much.